So hello, everyone. So this is through Google Meeting. So I just want to remind everyone to be on mute throughout the event. And at the end, we'll have a few minutes for question and answer. And then that you can, at that time, you can unmute yourself. And if you want to be on camera, you can. You don't have to be. And to put for the best viewing experience, to put your view option, which is in the top right-hand corner, into speaker view. And that way you'll be able to see Rob and Holder. And I think that's all I need to cover. So I'm gonna turn it over to Robin.
Okay, thank you so much, Kim. Hi, all. I'm delighted to be here. And I'm just gonna pretend that we're all in my studio or in your studio, have a very relaxed conversation, and I'm delighted to share a little bit of my process. The title of this exhibition, and I have to say I'm very pleased to be able to show my work at ArtRage because I've been very impressed with the kind of work that they do through the years and their ability to remain true to the issues that concern all of us and present events and artwork and artists that are committed to trying to reveal some of the difficult realities that we live with in our very complicated society. So the works that Rose and Kim curated for this show come from two different series. One is the USA, United States of Anxiety series that I started somewhere around 2013. And the other series is COVID-19, First Responders Were in It Together. So I thought first what I do is give you a little look-see of areas of my studio so you get an idea of the physical world that I inhabit when I'm floating around in my mind's eye and my hands are at work without me necessarily being in charge. So this is an area of tables. Here's some rollers set up for printmaking. I think this particular shot was taken just before I hosted a group of youngsters from the Brooklyn Museum. This is another area of the studio where my etching press is, inking tables, inks, Hanshi, Hanco, lithographic inks, and work on the walls. This is an area, this is more of an intimate area, my drawing table, an R3000 printer, my computer, which I use a lot, and a die cutter and another printer. So that kind of gives an idea of part of the space that I'm moving around in on a regular basis. This is a small little table Martech press for those of you that are printmakers. So the first group of works that I want to share with you are the USA, United States of Anxiety pieces. And this one is a series that is actually, I think, one of the first groups of works that I created with this particular technique. Unlike most artists, what I've been doing for the past 30 or 35 years is every time I decide to work with and develop a group of images, I work in a series. And I try to select a particular approach, a particular medium to use for that series, which is probably not the most marketable approach because when you do artwork, your work becomes at a certain point a commodity that has to be marketed and it has to be predictable. But I'm kind of going about it in the exact opposite way because my commitment is trying to challenge myself to come up with approach that's unfamiliar to me so that I can grow and I can stretch. So this was one of the first series that I developed working with small drawings that are 9 by 12. And here's the original portrait drawing that this image is based on. And then taking a photograph of my drawings and collaging it digitally with photographs or photographs of actual places or objects or structures or photographs of textures that I had printed. So the advantage of this is it gives me an opportunity to work much larger than I could work if I did everything by hand. So what happens is I started with this small photograph. I merged it digitally with this house, and I had it printed out in a large format. So the dimensions are here, 45 inches by 33 inches. And then I painted and or drew on top of that print. So it's a layered approach. Now, the concept behind this entire series, United States of Anxiety, is trying to respond to and express the reality that many of us are really very concerned and disillusioned that we are losing our democracy and we are losing our middle class status. And I first started thinking about this theme very, very intensely after the financial economic meltdown. I believe it was like in 2008, 2009. Kimberly, is that right? Do you remember that, when we had that huge real estate market meltdown and the economy melted down?
2000.
Yeah, I started thinking about the fact that many of us or our colleagues or neighbors or family members are emotionally and psychologically middle class, but the reality of our finances and the reality of our ability to project a growing, prosperous future is diminishing. So what I did was I started looking around for photographs of buildings that were dilapidated or abandoned, because I was circling around the idea of using the real estate market and many of the neighborhoods and infrastructures in industrial cities falling apart because of the economic meltdown and outsourcing. So my concept was, let me see if I can use some buildings that are kind of falling apart that represents the home, the neighborhood, the security, the building of a community, the infrastructure that keeps people together in society. And I focused on looking at images of structures in the Detroit area at first, because symbolically to me, that was representing the auto industry and the real explosion of the American middle class with the Ford Auto Company and the ability of Americans to have a blue collar job and have their own home, at least Caucasian people. 60, 70, 80 years ago, the idea of the American middle class was very much attached to those industries. And the fact that we have been outsourcing a lot of almost all of our manufacturing at this point really meant that we were losing a lot of that ability to have a middle class life. So here you see again the original colored pencil portrait. And I work very carefully to try to figure out how to convey a certain state of mind or a certain emotion. This one is called Equal Under the Law, and it might be self-explanatory. This is a man of color. And I tilt the face to try to give a kind of a quizzical questioning feeling to the face. I tried to make the actual structure of the building come out and recede from the face. So the idea for me, I guess I should also mention that I have used different approaches to buildings or houses in many different series of mine, and they always represent something about the core of identity or the fundamental structure of society or community or home, which is in the best case scenario, the place where people learn who they are taught their guidelines and ethics and navigations of society, where we feel safe. So the whole idea is to have these buildings that are a little bit off center. You'll notice that they're all kind of crooked or not standing up straight or have some sort of delicate, tenuous balance. And here's another, and I also was very interested in trying in the series to use faces of people from different ages, different ethnic, racial groups, different nationalities. So again, there's this feeling of disappointment or despair or confusion or disillusionment or anxiety or pain, all related to our United States of anxiety. And this one I did around the time when there was a lot of news coverage of those cages down along the Mexican-American border and children in cages. And I tried to convey something traditional about Mexico by using a parts of a pattern of a very traditional, typical ceramic tile that you find a lot in Mexican homes and Mexican courtyards and fountains. And then little strips and bits of red, white, and blue, of course, which represent the United States of America, and then remnants of a fence. So you might be able to tell here that there are these remnants of a fence. This one was very purposely an elderly woman. It was an Asian woman, but it may not be recognizable. But my idea is I have infused the work, of course, with my intention. So here's another kind of a structure, a home structure. Now, the other series that ArtRage has presented is my most recent series that I'm still actually developing, which the entire name is a little lengthy. COVID-19 first responders were in it together. So my concept here, and I use the same approach, drawing portraits, using bits of textural effects and merging them together digitally, having them printed out large. And these are the largest works on paper that I've done to date, except for the drawings that I did for very large public art commissions. But I'm kind of excited about these. And actually behind me, there's some more works that were done with the same dimension and the same approach. So the whole idea is to point out that the whole, what we're calling now the supply chain of goods and even services really has to do with the interconnectedness, actually on a global level, of how people, human beings, are part of a complex, layered system of getting natural resources, fabricating things from them, shipping them, transporting them, packaging them, and then distributing them. So any item that we're using has been through many, many hands and often through many countries. And at the same time, I wanted to point out and emphasize the fact that many of the people that held our entire society together, particularly last year, 2020, from the middle of March onward, were people who are not paid well, often don't have health benefits, do not have pensions, who worked way over and beyond the normal hours and were weathering tremendous anxiety and fear and sadness and despair to keep working, to keep our society minimally functioning. So here I have sort of like the silhouette of one person. And this piece is dedicated to a neighbor of mine who works at Costco. And with the mask, of course, something that we've all become all too familiar with, has the face of one person, then on his upper body is the face of another person. Again, to emphasize the fact that we're part of each other, we're connected, we're working in and out of each other. And here's a truck driver, because the distribution of goods and materials became something that we thought about, perhaps many of us for the very first time last year, because we couldn't get a lot of items that we wanted. So I decided to do a truck driver. And interestingly enough, when I was working on this particular piece, George Floyd was murdered, and somebody pointed out to me that this silhouette of this guy looks like it could be George Floyd. So I don't know if that was just something in the air that I picked up, but it wasn't intentional. But I thought it was kind of interesting how that worked out. So here you can see the interesting things that can be done with digitally collaging the face. It takes on a very almost mystical, magical look when I interweave this young woman's face with these parts, these textures that represent the COVID virus, and something that's so deadly and so terrifying, on the other hand, visually is very stunning and very engaging. And I tried to give this piece a kind of a feeling of the unknown, of something ephemeral, something that you can't quite grasp onto, because I think many of us, for the first time, experienced a feeling of lack of control, lack of power, because we just really didn't, and we still don't really know what's going to happen. And here's the face here. This is a nurse, which of course the nurses were so instrumental in saving lives, and not only saving lives, being sort of conduits for some of the COVID patients in facilities who were desperate for some kind of communication with their families, and they would often call them or FaceTime with them or give letters back and forth. So these are the people that absorb and kind of held a lot of emotion and despair, and I wanted to really celebrate them and acknowledge them. And here is another one. This is a respiratory specialist, and I purposely made this an African-American man because many Americans don't immediately, when they think of somebody who's highly trained, they don't, in their mind's eye, they're not going to see an African-American man as somebody as being so prepared, educated, and experienced. And on him is, this is one of the most direct pieces. You can see his original portrait, and then the areas where I've applied remnants of what are the COVID virus. In addition, there are these lines that are part of a tree, the branches of a tree. And again, the idea I'm trying to convey is this network that we're all a part of, and these also reflecting the roots of movement from one place or another, or the strands of different nationalities and religions and races and genders that make up our society. And here is one of my personal favorites, a piece that's a pulmonologist. And again, I have one face here, and I think very carefully, how am I going to position the face? What part of the face am I going to include? Another thing I should mention is that through the years, I've noticed that if I only use part of an image, like let's say if I only use part of an image, it conveys or expresses something perhaps a little more engaging because I'm not showing or telling everything. And my goal is, of course, for people to spend a little time looking at my work and trying to determine what it means to them, what they see, and how that might resonate with their understanding of life and the world and themselves, or how that might mirror or mimic something that they're experiencing. And here's another face here, which kind of takes on a different feeling or expression because the colors have changed. So a lot of this is really my opportunity to manipulate and change things to convey something very particular. And again, here are ropes, very thick, heavy ropes that for me in this piece represent the same idea that those tree branches represented. The interconnectedness that we all share, the interweaving of how society is built and how it functions, the movement of people and ideas and goods and services from one location to another. So in the background, this is kind of something that I'm always thinking about, that's always resonating with me. And this one, again, the branches, the tree branches. This is an X-ray technician holding a little mouse, looking at a monitor, which we can't see. And then the face of an Asian man. And I notice here, I mean, it's interesting because every time I look at my work, I notice things that I didn't notice before. You'd think that an artist is very well aware of what they're creating, but I'm not always seeing everything when I make it or immediately afterwards. And sometimes it takes some time for me to really look and see things or notice things or interpret things in a different way. But here again, those branches and his face sort of semi-transparent, regressing and protruding in and out of this whole reality of being interconnected. So that's what I can say about it. And I welcome anybody who has any comments, questions, responses, impressions.
I'll just jump back on, I guess, and invite if anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question, or if they're more comfortable putting a question in the chat, I can go ahead and read it. But I'll just start off with a comment. It was like so interesting for me to see those portraits that you started from, and to like how actually like kind of different they like what you've done to them has changed them. And so it's just as part of as a part of the process. You know, I knew that's how the work started originally with portraits, but that it's sort of like not what I guessed they would have looked like. So that was really cool to see those. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes, Kim, and behind me on the wall is a piece, here a large piece, and then up in the upper right is the original photograph. So you can kind of see how I've used it and how I've changed it by digitally collaging different patterns. And actually on the face of the piece behind me, these patterns that the face has that almost look like whiskers are part of petals of a flower of a print that I made years ago. So in a way, I revisit some of my work from the past and I find new ways to use it, or I find aspects of it that I appreciate in a different way.
I have a question, Robin.
Yeah.
Your subjects, the photographs, are they usually like people that you know, or is it like somebody that you've seen in the street that to you has an interesting face or look, or
They're all different kind. This is very funny that you're asking this, Arlene, because I'm sitting here looking at the screen and beyond the screen is a wall. And on that wall is a portrait that I've done of one of the participants who's with us right now. I'm going to turn my screen around so you can see this face. Can you see Pops Peterson?
yes.
Yes. So interesting question. Some of the portraits, as you know, are portraits that I did, and I have this sort of as an open-ended project of my high school classmates from LaGuardia School for the Arts, which we called Music and Art at the time. So many of them were I did about 50 portraits and I'm still drawing them, but the idea is I wanted to document many of my colleagues and former classmates, because much of who I am and what I believe in and what I've been able to do throughout the years really began to crystallize when I was in high school. It was a really important era for me. And many of my classmates are very involved in the arts. And I might point out that Arlene Jacks, who's with us today, works in the entertainment business. And Pops Peterson just very recently, a few days ago, had a wonderful mural painted that has to do with Ruby Bridges. So sometimes I get photographs off the internet and I merge features, parts of one person with parts of another person. Sometimes I just make up the faces. So the faces, I happen upon them in many different ways. So thank you for asking. Good question. Pops, you're muted. We can't hear you. Maybe you could put something in the chat. Your mute is off, but we can't hear you. I also might mention, while we're waiting to see if he can get his sound on, is that the way I'm working now, where I'm doing these small portraits, is easier for me, because as I get older, I used to be able to stand for 12, 14, 16 hours at a time and work. And I can't do that anymore. So the approach that I'm finding that works for me now is something that takes some of the pressure physically off of me. So I can work small, I can end up doing it large, and then giving it some really intimate personal applications. And Pops is saying, I was looking at a question that he has, do you limit the number of prints, or as a collage, are they all one of a kind? They're all one of a kind. There is no reproductive, they're not prints in the sense that they are multiples. What does multiply is I can take a portrait and I can use it in more than one work. So the portrait might end up in a larger work. And I think one of the pieces behind me has some portraits in it that are also in other pieces, but treated in a different way. So when I'm referring to prints, it's not multiples, it's just the process. I'm not very conventional in the way that I do prints because I'm not really interested in creating multiples, but I love the print making process and the printing process, if that makes sense.
What made you turn to technology?
Part of it was just a fascination with what could be done with technology, and sort of like a curious adventure to see if I could use technology in a way that I could almost treat it intimately, because people don't think of technology as being intimate. They think of it as being very standard and sort of wholesale, like there's many of them. And also because physically, I can do a lot of things digitally with the images that I could not do if I was doing it by hand. It would be either too expensive or too physically exhausting or extraordinarily time consuming. Meaning like it might take me 6 or 7 months to do one piece if I were to do it by hand in the dimension that I'm working now. Thank you so much for that question, because those are very important things that have to do with why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Hi, Robin. I came a little late, so you might have shared this already, but I also do collage, but I was really moved. It was really wonderful that you showed the original portrait and then the finished collage piece. And sort of my take with the portraits is they were sort of, I'm thinking of the right word, sort of pastel-y, kind of monotone. But then when you overlay these other images on it, all of a sudden everything comes alive. Like it almost feels like their facial features transform. And so I was curious, like, I don't know if you had made them separately or intentionally for this project, but was that part of it, that you would be able to therefore layer on other imagery, not lose it, but also not compete maybe with a very contrasty sort of portrait?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And that is very true, because here you see it's kind of, the original portrait is kind of bland. But when I photograph it and digitize it and start layering it with the image of the house, I can highlight certain areas. I can change the saturation level. I can make certain parts fade and certain parts more prominent. Here again, this is completely, it looks like a very different face almost, the coloring. So you're really understanding and grasping the advantage that I'm having by working this way. It also gives me an opportunity to change the way that a face looks and to try it out. Like, is this angle going to be better? Is this eye, should this eye be a little softer? Should this be more prominent? But I think this is a really good example, like bringing out this. It's a lot of digital manipulation, you know, putting the highlights in the cheeks, at the tip of the nose, shifting the color, layering this blue Mexican tile semi-transparently on top of the face, so the face has like a completely different coloring. So thank you so much for that question. It's right on the mark. And nobody ever asked me that. I'm so impressed.
And I'll just ask one more question, because I also do collage, but I do, you know, physical paper and found objects, etc. So do you, I guess I have to ask you, do you do that kind of a collage? And if you do you find a similar is it as rewarding or differently rewarding to work digitally as to do just hand collages?
I do hand collage, but it has a different, I think it has different physicalities. It has a different chemistry to it. I do collage because I love paper and I love to cut. And I've done actually I did a whole series of pieces that were a tribute to the American blue collar trades, the workers, and they were all cutting out silhouettes of figures and putting them in shadow boxes. In addition, when I work in arts and education, which I have done for over 35 years, I do a lot of collaging with youngsters because it's a very gratifying, immediate way for them to develop an art image without being intimidated about drawing realistically, which is what many people think makes an artist. But I think collaging is a very natural approach for me because it allows me to take different bits and pieces and kind of see how they can be layered or juxtaposed alongside, in front of, underneath and behind each other. And when I collage, I try with hard copy actual papers. I use a lot of rice papers. I use Canson pastel papers. I use papers that I myself printed textures and patterns on. So I love paper. Paper is just boundless, endless, infinite. And so, yeah, I understand, Linda, why you like collaging, because it's very engaging.
I think we have time for one more question. If there's one out there, Robin Holder actually has got another meeting or engagement to go to tonight, just a busy schedule. But is there one more person that would like to ask a question?
I see Andrew Galambos is highlighted and I've got his portrait. There you are, Andy. Hold on one second because I just want to hold up the portrait I did of you. And actually, I don't know if I ever told you this, but when I told my high school classmates that I was going to do this project, you were the first person to send me a photograph. And so this is actually the very first portrait of the series that I call The Castle, because we went to school in a building that we used to call The Castle up on the hill. LaGuardia School for the Arts, Music and Art, class of 1969. But
We still call it the Castle on the Hill.
Castle on the Hill, yeah.
True.
But it's wonderful to see that in a lifetime, things occur to us cyclically and kind of come back around and come back around and come back around. And the fact that we are still maintaining an association and a friendship is very beautiful, because you really can't get any kind of feedback from people that you've just met 2 or 3 years ago as you can from people that you've known for 55 years.
True. Very true.
Yeah. So I thank you all for joining me in this virtual salon, and I hope it's been informative and interesting. And it's really an honor to be able to have you let me run my mouth. So I thank you, and thank you, Patricia. And I'm glad that we were able to get together today.
I'm so happy to see you. See you. It's been very frustrating these last 2 years.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so
Okay.
much, Robin.
Hey,
And,
Thank you,
Best of luck,
Kimberly.
all of you.
Thank you, and
and I just want
congratulations
to
to
let everyone
ArtRage for maintaining such an important program.
Oh yeah, we're trying. And so the exhibit is up until January 15th. If you're in Syracuse, please stop by and see it. If you are not in Syracuse, there is a virtual exhibition that you can access from our website. So please take a look at that. And it's we've recorded this and it was going to be on YouTube, which I think is great because people have been asking so many questions about your technique because it's like so mysterious in a way of like, is this like a print? Is this a drawing? Like how, or I see things on the, so I think that's really great.
Yeah.
That you
They're all one-of-a-kind pieces.
So we're going to tell them, oh, you should watch our artist talk and you'll understand how the work was created. So thank you very much. Everyone have a great night and we'll hope to see you soon at ArtRage.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye-bye.